The night Emily Carter realized her marriage was quietly slipping away began with a phone lighting up in the dark. It wasn't a message meant to hurt her. It wasn't even secret. It was just Mark's work email, glowing on the nightstand at 11:47 p.m., pulling his attention away from her for the third time that evening. Emily lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his soft breathing change as his mind went somewhere else. She turned her face toward the window, toward the rain tapping gently against the glass, and felt something heavy settle in. Her chest thought she didn't cry. That was the strange part. Emily had always believed that big problems came with big signs shouting, slammed doors, broken trust. No one warned her that loneliness could arrive so quietly, wrapped in routine and polite silence. 14 years of marriage had taught her how to function beside someone without truly being with them. By morning, Mark was gone early as usual. A mug sat in the sink. His jacket was missing from the hook. Emily moved through the house on autopilot, packing lunches, answering quick questions, waving goodbye. The house emptied, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and her own thoughts. She was 39, a mother, a wife, and someone who felt paused in her own life. That afternoon, drove to the community art center, where she worked part-time. Coordinating local events was supposed to be temporary work, something flexible, something light. Instead, it became the only place where time seemed to move again. The center smelled like coffee and old books. People talked loudly, laughed easily. Emily liked that no one expected anything from her there beyond doing her job. She liked being seen as Emily, not just someone's wife or someone's mom. That's where Daniel Brooks entered her life. Without warning and without effort, he was leaning over a stack of flyers when she first noticed him. Sleeves rolled up, brow focused. He looked ordinary in the best way. Calm, present. When he looked up, he smiled, not the quick, polite kind, but the kind that suggested he actually noticed who was standing in front of him. "You must be Emily," he said. "They told me you're the one who keeps this place running." She laughed, surprised. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Daniel was new, helping with workshops after his recent move from Vancouver to Seattle. He mentioned a divorce casually, without bitterness, as if it were a chapter he had closed carefully. Emily didn't share much at first. She listened, and he listened back. Days turned into weeks. Conversations stayed safe, almost boring. Books, weather, work, stress. But there was something in the way Daniel paid attention that made Emily feel lighter. When she drove home, she told herself it was harmless. At home, things stayed the same. Mark wasn't unkind. He just lived in another mental space. Always planning, always solving, rarely feeling. When Emily spoke about her day, he nodded. When she stopped speaking, he didn't notice. One evening, she suggested dinner out. Mark checked his calendar before answering. "Maybe next week," he said. That night, Emily lay awake again, wondering when next week had become the answer to everything that mattered. The Art Center hosted a small weekend event in early fall. It ran late, and by the time people left, the parking lot was nearly empty. Emily gathered papers, turned off lights, and stretched her sore shoulders. She was tired but satisfied. She liked that feeling as she reached the hallway near the storage room. She sensed someone behind her. Not footsteps, not noise, just presence. Her body reacted before her mind did. Her breath caught. She froze. Daniel stood there, close but not touching, close enough that she felt warmth, like standing near a fire on a cold night. He hadn't meant to startle her. She could tell by the way he stopped instantly. Careful, respectful. "Sorry," he said quietly. Emily nodded, but she didn't move. The moment stretched, thin and charged. Neither of them spoke again. The hallway felt too small, the air too still. She could have stepped away. She didn't, for a few seconds. She let herself feel at the closeness, the awareness, the undeniable truth that someone saw her as a woman, not a role. Her heart pounded, not with desire, but with recognition. Then reality rushed back in. Emily stepped forward, breaking the moment like glass. She forced a smile, wished him good night, and walked out into the rain. The drive home felt longer than usual. Her hands shook slightly on the steering wheel. She hadn't done anything wrong, she told herself. But deep down, she knew she had crossed a line that wasn't visible to anyone else. That night, lying beside Mark, she felt the space between them more clearly than ever. It wasn't new. It had just been revealed. The next days passed quickly. Emily stayed busy, avoided being alone with Daniel, answered emails instead of conversations. She tried to focus on her family, on the life she had built. But once you see what's missing, you can't unsee it. At the art center, Daniel kept his distance without being cold. He didn't push, he didn't hint. That restraint made everything worse. It made him feel safe, and safety was something Emily hadn't realized she was craving. One afternoon, while sorting donations, Emily caught her reflection in a dusty mirror. She looked older than she felt, tired, faded. She wondered when she had stopped feeling like the main character in her own story. That evening, Mark came home late again. He apologized, distracted, already thinking about tomorrow. Emily nodded, smiling out of habit. When he fell asleep quickly, she stayed awake, replaying moments she hadn't planned to remember. She wasn't falling in love. She was waking up a week later. The Arts Center hosted a quiet planning meeting. Most people left early. Emily stayed, behind 2 finished notes. She didn't notice Daniel approaching until he spoke. "You okay?" he asked. Just that, no weight. No pressure. She looked at him and felt the truth rise to the surface. She wanted to say no. She wanted to say everything. Instead, she nodded and smiled again. But Daniel didn't move on. He waited. That small act broke her composure more than any confession could have. They stood near the window, the city lights flickering outside. Emily spoke carefully, choosing safe words. She said she felt stuck, that life felt quieter than it should, that she didn't recognize herself lately. Daniel listened like it mattered. When silence returned, it felt different this time. Heavy, but honest. As they packed up to leave, Emily felt the same closeness again. Daniel was behind her, not touching, not crossing any line. Just there, and once more. She didn't step away right away. In that pause, Emily understood something clearly. For the first time, this wasn't about Daniel. It was about the emptiness she had ignored for too long. She finally moved forward, creating space between them, and the moment ended without words. But the truth stayed as Emily locked the door and walked into the night. She knew she was standing at the edge of a choice she could no longer avoid. And the next step, whatever it was, would change everything. Emily Carter almost told the truth in a grocery store parking lot. She sat in her car, keys still in her hand, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mark asking if she could pick up milk. Such a small request, such a normal life. And yet her heart was racing like she was about to run. Something had shifted, and she could no longer pretend it hadn't. From that day on, Emily made a quiet decision to pull back. She stopped lingering at the art center. She kept her conversations with Daniel short and polite. She filled her schedule with errands, school pickups, late night cleaning, anything that kept her from thinking too much. She told herself that distance would fix everything. It didn't. At home, Mark remained the same. Kind, reliable, absent in ways that hurt more because they weren't obvious. He asked about the kids. He talked about work. Kissed her forehead before bed like a habit he'd never questioned. Emily tried to match his energy. But inside, she felt like she was holding her breath all day long. One night after dinner, she suggested they talk. Mark looked surprised. About what? About us. She almost said, about how lonely I feel. About how I stood still while another man stood close to me because I missed feeling alive. Instead, she said, nothing. Just tired. The words felt like a lie the moment they left her mouth. Days passed. Emily felt stretched thin between who she was and who she pretended to be. She wasn't proud of herself, but she wasn't reckless either. She didn't want to break her family. She didn't want to hurt anyone. She just wanted the ache inside her chest to stop. Then came the afternoon. Daniel asked her a simple question. They were both early for a meeting, sitting in the quiet lobby of the Arts Center. Rain tapped against the windows again, the same way. It always seemed to when her thoughts got heavy. "You don't seem like yourself lately," Daniel said gently. "Are you okay?" Emily laughed too quickly. "I'm fine." Daniel didn't argue. He didn't push. He just nodded, but his eyes stayed on her, steady and patient. Something in that calm attention broke her guard. They walked to a nearby cafe, the kind with chipped mugs and soft music playing in the background. They sat across from each other, hands wrapped around warm cups. Emily spoke carefully at first, like she was testing ice. She talked about feeling invisible, about loving her family but feeling forgotten inside her own marriage, about waking up every day knowing something was wrong but not knowing how to name it. Daniel listened without judgment. When she finished, he didn't offer solutions. He didn't say what she should do. He simply said, "That sounds heavy." Those words stayed with her. When they left the cafe, the air felt charged again. Not because of attraction alone, but because of honesty. Outside, people rushed past them, living their own lives, unaware of the quiet moment unfolding on the sidewalk. Daniel stopped walking. Emily did too. They stood there, close but careful. Emily felt the weight of 1,000 choices pressing down on her. She knew what stepping closer might mean. She also knew what stepping away would cost her emotionally. Daniel didn't touch her. He didn't lean in. He waited. That was the moment Emily understood that the real danger wasn't desire. It was feeling understood. "I can't," she said. Softly, her voice steady but her hands trembling. Daniel nodded. There was disappointment in his eyes, but also respect. "I know," he said. "I just wanted you to know you're not wrong for feeling what you feel." They parted ways without drama, without promises, without crossing lines that couldn't be erased. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She lay beside Mark, listening to the familiar sounds of the house, and finally admitted the truth to herself. The problem wasn't Daniel. The problem was that her marriage had slowly turned into something that no longer held her heart. The next morning, she asked Mark if they could talk after dinner. This time she didn't take it back. They sat at the kitchen table once the house was quiet. Emily's hands rested flat on the wood, grounding herself. Mark looked tired but attentive, like he sensed the weight of the moment. "I'm not happy," she said simply. Mark blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I feel alone," she continued. "I feel like we live side by side, not together. I don't want to live like that anymore." The conversation that followed wasn't loud. There were no accusations, no shouting, just long pauses and honest words that had been waiting years to be spoken. Mark admitted he had been distant. He admitted he didn't realize how far apart they had grown. Emily admitted she had felt seen by someone else and how deeply that scared her. It hurt. But it was real. They didn't solve everything that night. They didn't make promises they couldn't keep. But they agreed on one thing. Pretending was no longer an option. Over the next weeks, Emily stepped back even further from Daniel. She focused on clarity, not comfort. She started therapy. She asked herself hard questions about what she wanted and what she was willing to fight for. Mark tried to, in his own way. He showed up more. He listened more. Sometimes it felt hopeful. Sometimes it felt too late. Emily learned that growth isn't dramatic, it's quiet and uncomfortable. It asks you to sit with choices you avoided and face versions of yourself you ignored. One evening, months later, Emily ran into Daniel by chance at a community event. They exchanged polite smiles, a few words, nothing more, as she walked away. She realized something important. The moment that once felt like a turning point had already done its work. It had forced her to wake up, to stop drifting through her life on autopilot. She didn't know exactly how her story would end. Whether her marriage would heal or whether she would choose a different path entirely. But she knew this. Sometimes the closest moments are the ones that stop us from going too far. And sometimes standing still is the moment that finally pushes us forward.